All right, there we go. Take it away.
All right, welcome. Thank you guys for joining our presentation. Tonight, we're going to be talking about addiction, how addiction impacts grief, and how the person that we love may have been addicted. So at any point during the presentation, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. For my part of the presentation, I'm totally open to questions throughout, and we can have a discussion. But maybe, Emily, if you could share the PowerPoint. All right. So if you see me look to my left, I'm looking at my notes. So hopefully it's not too distracting. So grief and addiction. I put a little quote here at the bottom. Not all addictions are rooted in abuse or trauma, but I do believe they can all be traced to painful experience. A hurt is at the center of all addicted behaviors. The attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. So if you don't know of him and you're interested in the topic, I highly recommend Dr. Gabor Maté. He's a Canadian psychiatrist. And once I read his book, it totally changed my outlook on addiction. And he has a very compassionate, sort of humanistic approach to understanding the topic. And we hope that if you take anything away from our presentation tonight, it's a more compassionate understanding. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Jessica Mead. I am a loss therapist and a survivor. I am also a substance abuse counselor. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor. So I became very interested in the field of addiction because my father, who killed himself, also was addicted to alcohol. So throughout my childhood, I experienced just the struggles and the hardships, and watching him sort of be addicted and then recovered, addicted and then recovered, and just all of the turmoil it caused our family. I was very interested in trying to help other people through that. And I'll also let Sharon introduce herself as she has a similar story.
Okay, well, I'm Sharon. I have been a loss therapist for about, I'm not sure at this round, but 13 or 14 years. So I did the math, and I retired from Catholic Charities a while back, but I was there 35 years and now 14 more, so, or 15 more, I'm not sure. So 50 years of my life has been at Catholic Charities. I don't remember when I wasn't. I too I had a certification in alcohol counseling. I let that lapse because I didn't need to have that with an LCSW. I could work in the addiction field. And one of the major jobs I had at Catholic Charities was to work with homeless veterans in recovery. And we had a place at the VA in Maywood. I too, and I guess most families, you know, it's not a surprise. There's addiction abounds. My father was alcoholic, and he died at the age of 36. He never got into recovery. He did not get medical treatment for withdrawal, and I think that's what killed him. He died of a heart attack, but I think from withdrawals. I was 7, my sister was 12, my mom was 32. And, you know, I could tell you all growing up in a family that there were alcoholics all over the place. I mean, it's not anything that's new to me. And I'm interested in Al-Anon and AA and adult children of alcoholics. And my part of the presentation actually is going to be to talk about, you know, when we ask people to change a behavior, it's really important that we get another behavior in its place. And that's going to be my presentation, and talking about, you know, things we can do to deal with the grief and pain if we are using alcohol and drugs to deal with it now. And so it's probably things you've already heard about and known, but it's going to be a real nice review And at the end, I have some fun things to share that I'm looking forward to. So that's where I'm at.
All right. So we can move on to the next slide, which is just, am I controlling? Oh, Emily is, okay. So we've introduced ourselves. My portion, so Sharon and I are both doing this together. So mainly I'm going to be talking for the first half. Sharon's going to be talking for the second half. The main point of my piece of the presentation is just to understand addiction. So to give a very sort of general layover of what's going on in the addictions world, how prevalent it is. And then Sharon's really going to be talking about healing options. All right, next slide. So what is an addiction? So we all have our understanding about what it is. The clinical definition is here. It's an addiction can be when the use of substance contributes to missing school, work, or other responsibilities, relational distress, psychological tolerance, craving the substance, and failure to quit using multiple times after trying. So that's the definition that I came up with, sort of compiling a bunch of different definitions because there's a lot of them. Alice Miller, who is a person in the field, who's also really interesting to read if you're interested in learning more about it. It is a sign, a signal, a symptom of distress. It is a language that tells us about a plight that must be understood. All right. So the main point of this slide that I think is important to understand is that it's more than just a behavior. So it's more than just someone drinking and causing distress to their family or to themselves. It's usually a symptom of something. People are usually taking drinking or using drugs to the level where it's out of control to try and manage something that's going on inside of them. All right, so next slide. So this is just a slide about the different ways that we understand addiction. So one that most of you are probably familiar with, depending on when and where you grew up, is the moral model. The root of the problem is a character issue. It's a weakness, and clearly that has led to decades of stigma, and it's still rooted in us. Even us professionals, you know, I'll talk to some colleagues or professionals where like I can still hear stigma. Sometimes I catch myself sort of judging the behavior and needing to check myself. So it's very, very rooted in us as a culture and how we understand addiction. The medical model is a step closer, I think, to a compassionate understanding of addiction. So the medical model says that it's a disease with a biological, neurological, genetic, and environmental source of origin. So this is where you might see AA. So AA really helps the addicted person and family members to understand that this is something that is in their brain, sort of that has a strong hold, is really, really hard to overcome without lots of support and lots of people and recovery options around you. So the medical model is definitely a step closer to where I think we need to be, but it still doesn't quite hit the mark. And this is where my friend, Dr. Gabor Maté, really comes in. He understands addiction from a trauma and vulnerability model. So he sees addiction as a universal experience, that all living things seek things that feel good, and that the people who are addicted have the highest levels of pain and suffering. So what that means is that we all try to do something to increase all of those good neurotransmitters in our brain. So we might exercise, we might eat a lot of food that's not good for us, that feels good in the moment. We might seek out toxic relationships. We might use drugs. We might use alcohol. All of us at some point, have something that we're seeking to make us feel better. Some of us have adaptive or sort of healthier ways to balance that out, and some of us don't. And people who are addicted tend to have higher levels of pain and suffering than people who are not. So I just asked the question that maybe you can reflect on or think about. What is your mental representation of someone who's addicted? So maybe we can sort of pause there, take 30 seconds, maybe close your eyes, and just sort of think about when you hear someone who is addicted or someone who's using drugs or a drug abuser, what types of pictures do you see in your mind?
Do you want us to talk out loud or
if you want to, I was just sort
think
of
about it? Just
yeah, I was just sort of giving some space to just think about it, but I can move on if it feels too long. So next slide, Emily. So this is what I think a lot of people imagine. I don't want to put that into your minds. Obviously, you might have a different picture, but a lot of people picture someone on the side of the road, someone who doesn't have a home, someone who looks disheveled or dirty or whatever. Okay, next slide. So Alicia says trauma and coping mechanism, which is maladaptive, but helps the person cope. Definitely. So this is Ben Affleck. And he has been in recovery for many years and has had 3 stints in rehab. He reports to have been an alcoholic for over 20 years. If you've been following him recently, he's in a new romantic relationship with J-Lo, but previous to that, he had another relapse that sent him into a rehabilitation hospital. So this is also the face of someone who's struggling with addiction. Okay, next slide. It could be this. It could be a mom with 3 children who also uses drugs or alcohol to cope. Next slide. This is Demi Lovato, if you're not familiar. So she has been very public about her struggles with drugs and alcohol and eating disorder. So this is another face of addiction. Next slide. And this, it could be a businessman, could be a lawyer, could be a doctor. And just a couple more. Adele. That's all I have to say about that. She is just so amazing. And she also is addicted. It can be, next slide, young people. And then just the last slide, it's a picture of Robert Downey Jr., who reportedly came very close to dying from his addiction as well. So I guess I just show those slides just to sort of get other ideas, other mental representations about what substance use and addiction can look like. All right, so next slide. So that, I think, brings up sort of probably what you're looking to hear about tonight, that there is a stigma, and that stigma impacts us survivors. So for grievers and for people who have lost someone to suicide, you're already dealing with a very complex, isolating, stigmatizing experience by virtue of your loved one dying by suicide. I think that if you put addiction into the mix, it just becomes even more complicated for people to understand your situation, more complicated for you to understand your loved one and their loss. And then also, grievers also can become addicted, or maybe had a history of addiction before their loss. And addiction can be really difficult to talk about and acknowledge, as we know. And a lot of people, that becomes their number one mechanism to cope with the intense pain of grief. Most people don't understand addiction in the way that we're hoping to discuss it tonight. I feel like our mental model and even professional models of addiction continue to produce more stigma. There's a lot of doctors that don't know how to talk about addiction, a lot of other professionals. So hopefully tonight we can all sort of have a common language to talk from. All right, next slide. So how prevalent is addiction? I would actually say it was the epidemic that public health talked about before the pandemic. So if you look at the numbers there, I think I had them and I took them out, but the numbers are really high, like the number of adults in the US who struggle with an addiction. So about 20% of adults have reported an addiction or are currently addicted. So this is all data from SAMHSA, which is substance abuse, mental health, substance abuse, mental, I'm totally blanking on the acronym right now. But anyway, they are a government entity that studies mental health and substance abuse. We get a lot of our data from them. So 60% of people who report to be addicted to a substance are addicted to alcohol. One thing to note about the numbers is that if you were to look on the CDC's website or on SAMHSA's website or on NEMA's website, they separate out the numbers. So they separate the numbers out from drug abuse and alcohol, which makes it kind of complicated because sometimes we're talking about one and the same thing because they go hand in hand for a lot of people. But it's hard to sort of just read the numbers because they're separated out, I think. But alcohol is pretty damaging. Lots of people die as a result of alcohol use. Lots of people lose their homes. Lots of people lose relationships, partners. Alcohol is legal and very socially accepted. So Debbie and I were talking the other day about, alcohol, and Debbie had mentioned it's almost like socially weird if you're not drinking sometimes. So that is just how much our culture sort of reveres and loves alcohol. And alcohol's been around for centuries, obviously, and there's lots of other cultures that use it as part of traditions and religious ceremonies. But it makes it acceptable. So if we think about like college drinking, like when I was in college, like people binge drinked every weekend, and it was sort of like you planned your weekends around that, which looking back, it's so not normal. That's so not like the way the world works, but it's legal and socially accepted. So lots of people use it, and lots of people who are vulnerable easily become addicted. 21.4% of adults reported to use illicit drugs in the past year. I can't remember actually if this number does include marijuana because it's not federally.
Do you want me to find your numbers, because I feel like they're not there because of something that I said? I could.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't think it's important unless people
Okay.
really want to see the exact numbers.
Okay.
I think just sort of the more takeaway is that it's just really prevalent, and that probably, Sharon shared her addiction story. I shared that my dad was addicted, but probably most people have been impacted by substance abuse or addiction in some way. Either they are the person who struggled with the substance use, or they had someone close to them struggle. This report also states the majority of people who indicated SUD as substance use disorder report that the COVID pandemic caused increases in drug and alcohol use. So I think it's interesting. A lot of these governmental agencies don't have like new numbers that are really concrete yet. But a lot of what I was reading was just how much people are expecting addiction to just be totally on the rise. And I'm going to show you in a little bit a graph, but what people are anticipating is really bad. All right, next slide. So this slide is dedicated to talking about the death that occurs due to addiction. So in 2019, which was the last CDC reported statistic, 70,000 people died of a drug overdose. I put 47,000 people die from suicide as just sort of a number to show you, we know about suicide and we know that it's a big deal. So 20 something more thousand people die from drug overdoses in the US. Opioids, including prescription painkillers and heroin, were 76% of these deaths. And from 2018 to 2019, the largest increase in death rates involved synthetic opioids. The largest increase in death rates involving synthetic opioids occurred in the West. So that was a 67.9% increase in opioid death in just a year. So what people attribute that to is the fentanyl crisis. So a lot of illicit drugs are laced with fentanyl. And from my understanding, when you take fentanyl, there's really no controlling how much or how little that you're getting. And a lot of people aren't realizing that the heroin or whatever they're buying has fentanyl in it. So they'll use the amount that they're used to using, and it could be laced to look like more substance with a very powerful painkiller. So, and prior to that, there was the prescription painkiller crisis that seems to have been more controlled than previous, but a lot of people moved from illicit drugs to prescription drugs. I would say probably in like the 2010s-ish is when the numbers were sort of really pointing toward that. And the CDC worked to train primary care doctors, emergency doctors to try and limit some of the med seeking. Also, if you're interested, the US, so of all the opioids in the world, I think the US controls 90% of them, which is just so crazy. Like, we are a country of like painkillers and drugs. And excessive alcohol use is responsible for more than 95,000 deaths in the United States each year, which is about 261 deaths per day. So again, those are from the CDC. Those are the most recent statistics. Okay, next slide. COVID and addiction. So some provisional data from the CDC indicate that there was an estimated 100,000 drug overdose deaths in the United States during the 12-month period ending in April of 2021, which is a 28.5% increase from the 78,000 deaths during the same period before. And if you remember my previous slide, there was a 67% increase from 2018 to 2019. The CDC also doesn't have alcohol stats out yet, but they estimate, I was reading an article about how they estimate that the alcohol stats will look similar due to increased social isolation, relational distress, increased financial stress, all leading to more pain, more suffering, and finding new ways to cope, which people often turn to drugs and alcohol. All right, so next slide. This is a slide that shows the tremendous wave or rise in deaths. So if you look at the bottom, it lists sort of the different waves. So wave one was the early 2000s. So the rise in prescription opioid overdose deaths. Wave two was the rise in heroin deaths in 2010. Wave three was the rise in synthetic opioid overdose deaths. And if you look at the trajectory for other synthetic opioids, it's sort of very steeply increasing, and heroin sort of staying pretty stable. All right. Next slide. So addiction and suicide. There is a correlation. So addiction increases the risk for suicide. Opioids, including heroin, prescription painkillers, are present in 20% of suicide deaths. 22% of deaths by suicide involve alcohol intoxication. And acute intoxication is present in 30 to 40 suicide attempts. Many loved ones were addicted at the time of their death and couldn't figure out another way to cope. So there is a link. We hear lots of stories from survivors about a loved one's struggle with substances, which eventually led to their death. And a lot of people use substances to die. So there's definitely a correlation between the two, and probably why a lot of you are here tonight. I'm sorry, I realized I just spelled opioids wrong too on that slide, little typo. Okay. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention about the previous slide. What I was reading about as I was looking into it, there's a lack of research in areas of causation. So no one's able to say like addiction causes suicide or depression causes addiction, which causes suicide. It just really talked about the correlation and how oftentimes they go hand in hand. Yeah, that was it. That was it for that. Okay, so next slide. So reducing pain, it's why we get addicted. So all human beings seek an increase in dopamine and serotonin. So dopamine and serotonin are two neurotransmitters that work to make you feel good, to keep your mood stable. So we know that like if you were to take a antidepressant medication, an SSRI, what that means, it's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it actually prevents if the two neurons are here, it prevents the reuptake of this free-floating serotonin, because we need this free-floating serotonin to keep our mood stable, to help us from ruminating or having a lot of cognitive distortion. So we need certain levels of dopamine and serotonin in our brain in order to function in a healthy way. We all have a vulnerability to become addicted, but some people have a greater vulnerability than others. That's why we don't all become addicted. From physical pain to emotional pain, alcohol and other drugs work really well at providing short-term relief. So as a grown-up, I understood my dad's addiction in a much more compassionate way as I've learned more about addiction and substance use. But I do know that he had a lot of physical pain. So he was in a motorcycle accident when he was in his 20s. He also had a lot of emotional pain. So he had quite a traumatic upbringing. He lost multiple siblings as a child. They died. And there was lots of violence where he was living at the time. And I think that he never really understood why he was using alcohol to cope. And it just became sort of what he did. And for him, it played a continued role in avoidance. So if you are continuously using alcohol to cope with feelings of pain, you're never really understanding the pain. You're just sort of shutting it down. And alcohol and drugs work really, really well at shutting it down in the moment. Obviously, we know that it causes much bigger of a problem when you're not sort of shutting it down at the source, but we know why people become addicted, because it's really helpful. So Dr. Gabor Maté says that addiction is a reaction to human suffering. The more suffering, the greater risk for addiction. And I feel like when I read that line, I felt like it just rang so true for survivors. Our loved ones had so much pain. And that's why all of this was going on. And just one, I said this earlier, so I'll just mention it one more time. The addiction is not the forefront of the problem. So a lot of times we see the addiction as the problem. The addiction is there to cope with the problem. We can't see the problem if the person doesn't see the problem. We can't see the problem if they're not willing to understand or share their problem. So we see the addiction, which hurts many of us. And then the last slide that I have, see how we are in time here. Okay. So addiction and grief. So I talked about addiction and suicide. So many of us are here because our survivors were addicted, but maybe we're here tonight too. We're struggling ourselves with addiction. We're struggling with grief. Substances help us cope with painful loss. Over the years, I have had a few lost clients who have really, really struggled to feel the pain of their loss, and will use alcohol and drugs and sort of prevent the grief process from unfolding because it's too painful. For many of us, our gut reaction is to avoid. It's what we do. We hurt ourselves and we want to figure out a way to, make it better and make the pain go away. People report it can take the edge off of a day, help them get to sleep. I've heard a lot of survivors talk about nighttime being really, really hard and having a lot of trouble to go to sleep. Well, one thing that really helps to go to sleep is alcohol and drugs. It'll help get you to sleep. Obviously, it really impacts your sleep cycles for the negative and is not the best solution, but a lot of people use it to take the edge off and to sort of just get to sleep and just to shut their brain down before they go to bed. Alcohol also keeps us socially connected to friends. So for a lot of people, alcohol is socialization, and we do it to connect to other people. And there was a study that I was reading in the American Addiction Center that said that men can be particularly more at risk or vulnerable to substance use within the first 2 years after a loss. So this is a known thing that people who are grieving are more vulnerable to addiction as well. So that is all I have for now. Do we want to stop for questions or comments? I think there might be a couple of things in the chat. So.
Yes. There is one comment that I saw in the chat that Alicia put there. Fentanyl is when you're talking about fentanyl is very dangerous. It's brought over here from China and is also manufactured in Mexico. It can be laced with cannabis and virtually any illicit substance. Artist Prince died from a fentanyl overdose. It is advisable that opioid users or addicts carry Narcan. That's how Demi Lovato was revived. When they overdosed, their friend had Narcan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of political stuff about Narcan, but a lot of police departments are trying to pass them out in communities that have high rates of overdose. And also there's fentanyl strips that are also trying to be produced and put out. I guess right now, federally, they're considered drug paraphernalia. There's some like weird legal issue to them, but that could also be sort of a harm reduction approach, is to make sure that people have these strips so they know what they're using before they're using it.
Interesting. Oh, they're like testing strips. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry, testing strips.
No, that took me a minute to catch on. I know. Now I know what you're saying. And a comment about using cannabis for sleep or for cancer survivors, which I know that you mentioned a little bit in there too, Jessica, about like harm reduction, which I think probably is about. So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that's good to know, Alicia. Chicago police is getting everyone trained in carrying Narcan. So if anyone, and if it might not be true in your family or what someone is struggling with, but Narcan is more widely available than it used to be. Family members can absolutely get trained on how to administer Narcan if they do have someone who uses opiates in their own family. So that's really good to know.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Would you consider obsessive compulsive behavior in a child an addiction?
Not in this, I mean, I guess I'd want to understand what it was, what the obsessive behavior.
Just a tendency to obsess over things, like a recurrent thought. You know what I mean? With ADHD, you see that a lot with ADHD kids and maybe some general anxiety disorder. But do you find that that behavior tends to lead to addictive behavior later on? Alcohol, drugs, that kind of thing?
So I think kids that struggle with OCD and obsessive thoughts, you know, have diagnosable mental disorder called OCD. I think that any mental illness, especially one that's severe, could lead to an addiction. But I certainly don't think that, you know, a child who has obsessive thoughts will necessarily become addicted. But I think that untreated mental illness, I would just sort of, this is just my opinion, but untreated mental illness is probably one of the number one pathways to addiction. Struggling with, you know, pain and suffering and a thought process that they feel like they can't control. So I think that, you know, for a child, I would just be hoping that they are seeing a therapist, possibly seeing a psychiatrist, depending on their age, to sort of manage the OCD symptoms.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else has thoughts about that.
Right. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, but if anyone does have any questions or comments, please feel free to either put them in the chat or you're welcome to ask Jessica. And then you let me know when we switch gears. And
I think that's all for me. So Sharon.
And Jessica's not going anywhere. So
no, I'll be here.
If you have a question for her, that's okay. It's not too late. Okay, I'm going to switch over here for a second and I will spotlight Sharon and then I will go ahead and share her presentation. I'm going to close out of Jessica's so I don't start it again. Okay. There we go.
Well, that was a hard, it's going to be a hard act to follow. My whole goal is to, I'm probably going to repeat a few things that Jessica said just because that's how I started out. But my whole goal is to help you find balance in grief and healing options for your mind, your body, and your spirit. Next slide. Okay, so this may sound odd, but I feel there are benefits of using alcohol while grieving. And it's the good news, bad news. So the good news is you don't have to feel the pain of grieving. And you get a break from all the trauma and painful thoughts and feelings that go along with dealing with the suicide of your loved one. The pain of suicide has a tremendous impact on your mind, your body, and your spirit. And there is no doubt about it, alcohol works. However, it's temporary. The bad news is the next day your thoughts, feelings, and pain return with a vengeance, and you have to start all over again. There was no movement in the process of healing because it was all damped down by the alcohol. Plus, you might have one killer of a hangover. So is at this time alcohol can become a problem because it helps you heal or feel like you're healing some of the pain or you know, making some of the pain go away. So it's easy then to want to keep on using the alcohol. And so I'm going to introduce several questions that I would like you to think about if you ever think that you may have a problem, these are some of the questions we ask people very surreptitiously to find out where they are on the road to alcohol use. And when I say alcohol use, I would think drug also, but I'm going to say alcohol just to keep it simple. So the next slide is, this would be a real self-assessment for you. Has anyone, family or friend, told you that you are drinking too much and too often? Or have you said that to someone else? You know, that you're noticing somebody is having these behaviors. This is my favorite. Have you ever switched stores so that people aren't aware of how much you shop for liquor? You go to one Jewel, then another Jewel, go to a liquor store, then another liquor store, go to the drugstore. You know, that's kind of a tell, isn't it? You don't want people to see you there, like in a couple of days, they say, wow, you were just here. Have you attempted to stop, but you can't? Say, for instance, like you think, well, I'm going to go home tonight, I'm going to clean the house and cook a nice dinner, or I'm going to exercise, and then actually you sit down and you have a few drinks, and maybe more than a few, so that your goal is not to drink, but you end up drinking. And then this one is very interesting, is do you need more and more alcohol to arrive at the same ending? And we in the field call that tolerance. And it is very, it's a tell, because oftentimes having a drink, you feel light and giddy and you feel better. And then as the process goes on, you drink more and more and more and more, and people aren't even aware that you're drinking and you don't get drunk. That means your body is becoming adjusted to that. And that's tolerance. And then finally, if you abstain, do you feel ill, shaky, or disoriented? And I would only mention here, I know that withdrawal you need medical assistance for withdrawal, because it's very dangerous. Cold turkey is not good, except if after Thanksgiving. That's the only time you can have cold turkey. I know that withdrawing or getting off of heroin and cocaine will make you sick and wish you were dead, but alcohol affects every synapse in your body. Every nerve ending is filled with alcohol. So when you stop, they all misfire. And so that's why people die. I think when I told you my father died, that was 1953. They did not treat withdrawals. They just let you withdraw. Nowadays, they give you sedatives and things to calm you down so that your nerves don't go haywire. So if you have a loved one, or if you wonder, talk to a healthcare professional about how you want to get, stop drinking, but don't do it by yourself. And I think your doctor would be able to tell if you need detox or not. But there are, outpatient detox. You can detox either inpatient and treatment. And then that's the last I'm going to say about that, I think. Anyway, so the next slide. We talk about alcohol, but there are other, and I think Jessica mentioned, there are other excessive behaviors that impede progress in dealing with grief, and that's massive amount of times on the internet. Shopping can be addictive, video games, binge eating, and excessive exercise. Now you think, well, that exercise is good, but not anything that's excessive that keeps you from doing what you need to do to heal, then it's not helpful. And I didn't put on here, and I don't know why I didn't think of it at the time, but gambling. Gambling is an addiction also that's very harmful to families, in not so much the body, but money wise. And people have lost their homes gambling, and so that all those things are very harmful when it becomes excessive. Okay, next. The reason why addictive behaviors work, and it's because what we talked about mostly, it's distracting. It takes time away from feeling pain, and it provides a reprieve from grief. And I think that's very important, because you're in a lot of pain. And I'll say it again, while you're doing all these things, you're not dealing with the grief. It's a reprieve, but it's not helpful. It doesn't You know, it's not like doing positive kinds of things to get rid of grief that diminishes the grief over time. This does not. It really kind of stirs it up even more. But plus, then you've got other issues to deal with beside the grief. So there. Next. Okay, so the purpose of this segment of the presentation, and it gets a little bit more positive, I think, is to replace potential addictive behaviors with new positive behaviors. I said it before, if you stop a behavior, it's really important to put something in its place. You know, so because just to stop it, then you have an empty hole. It's to learn new ways to systematically deal with grief, pain, and loss. Strive toward balance between your spirit, your mind, and your body. Begin to take a look at self-care and self-nurturing and how it fits into your life. And to work on goals for healing your grief and loss. We will begin by looking at a connection between your spirit, your mind, and your body. Okay. Balance is the goal of becoming whole, and it's understanding the relationship. The body is our physicality, how we look, you know, what our appearance is, you know, how we walk, how we talk. The mind is how we think and feel. The spirit is the part of you that is not physical, but consists of your character and feelings. It is your soul, your life, your psyche, and ego. You know, I was looking at this little tulip. I say it's a tulip. I don't really know what it is. And balance is at the bottom. And you have mind, spirit, and body, and they are very closely connected, and they intermingle with each other. Because if you stop healing the mind, I think and you take away the mind, that whole little tulip's going to turn over. It's going to be out of balance. And so it works with all of them. You know, so we like, you know, the striving is to work to keep all those three things in balance, and that all that affects how we grieve. Okay, the next. Okay, I split the healing options into 3 sections. And I might mention, I went online and I looked at healing, you know, activities to heal while grieving. And there was this 99 options activities to do while grieving, and it was from Psychology Today. And I'm certainly not going to mention all the 99. Some of them were very, very easy to do, you know, like, clean your house, clean a drawer, you know. So if you are interested in the 99, just go online and Google it, you know, 99 ways to work with healing. So I looked at the spirit, the mind, and the body, and I separated some things out, and you're going to notice something, and I will bring that up. But under the spirit, that would nurture your spirit would be meditation, journaling, reflecting on gratitude, yoga, volunteering at a dog shelter, gardening, nature walks, and prayer. Things that would help your mind focus is to read a book, write down memories of your loved ones, join or start a grief blog, make a scrapbook, do word puzzles, bake, do crafts, teach a friend a skill you have. Some of those seem like they'd be physical, right? Well, we're going to get to the body, and that is walk, run, or jog. You notice I got yoga in there also, and yoga is in the spirit, and I suppose yoga would also help you strengthen your mind. So they really kind of overlap. Gardening, again, is in a couple of places because it's a physical action, but it also helps. I'll tell you, it helps me when I do a lot of groups and I hear everybody's pain. Gardening is very much helpful for me to not well, it just helps me get through listening to everybody's grief and pain, because you do a number of meetings and you have new people come all the time. So gardening is one of the things that I do. Exercise tapes are also very helpful to help build the endorphins, and you don't have to go out. I use exercise tapes in my home. Leslie Sansone is a wonderful, she walks in place. Also, there is chair yoga for anybody who is not able to do yoga. I used to do yoga, and now if I do yoga, I can't get off the floor. And so I don't do yoga anymore as much as I used to like it. But chair yoga kind of does the stretches and kind of gets your mind in there also. Or you can dance at home. But again, if you look, body, mind, and spirit are all interchangeable so much. So anyway, okay, those are some of those healing options that I chose that I thought might be helpful and that you might already do. All right, next tape. Next slide, I mean. I think it's helpful to set goals if you want to do some things, you know, just to say, again, if it's you that are feeling that you might be drinking or using drugs to grieve, to set some goals to say, well, I'm going to stop. You need to have some other activities, and it's real helpful to have goals to do that. And so I go to Weight Watchers, and they made this anagram of STAR because it's easy to remember. So the S in STAR is to be specific. And I would say that to be specific, it would be to say, I am going to journal for 10 minutes every morning. It's not a big goal. 10 minutes is doable. And that would be the T. It's truly doable. You could do it. Active and acceptable. I'm not active is probably the movement kind of goals, but it's acceptable to help you with grief. So whatever you think you want to do to change the patterns to learn how to deal with grief and in a more healthy way, if you're not doing it now. So it would be something that is acceptable to you. If journaling isn't, then don't do it. You know, if walking the dog 10 minutes a day, 3 times a day is doable, then that's what you do. And then relevant. I think what that means is that in terms of your goals would be relative to help you deal with the grief of the suicide or the loss. There's nothing that says don't make it too big, but truly doable is something I think that works. Every New Year's, I always start out the same goal every New Year's that says, I'm going to exercise 4 times a week. And within the first week, I have failed. So I just thought, you know, it's kind of nice to set a goal. So what I did this year, and don't ask me how I thought of this, I wasn't going to do anything, but I was going to take some colored stickers and I was going to mark my calendar for every time I exercised. The goal was not to exercise. The goal was to mark my calendar. And I will tell you, I don't think you can see it. I don't know if you can on there, but that little calendar in January is full of colored stickers. For whatever reason, that worked for me. So you have to figure out how you're what kind of goal you want to be successful. And so STAR, specific, doable, acceptable, and relevant. And I think that's helpful. Okay. Next slide. Okay, I think here I'm going to take a break and I'm going to introduce you to 2 women who are going to share a little bit of some of the things they have done to help their grief. And I don't know, Emily, are you going to? Okay, Denise is going to talk first. You're on, Denise.
Hi, my name is Denise. Lost my son, Luke, a 1.5 years ago to suicide. Prior to Luke's suicide, he suffered from addiction as well. And when Luke died of suicide, it was something that we never even thought about. We were always worried about an overdose. So when we did lose our Luke, it was very hard to eat, get out of bed, do anything at all. And I know that everybody here understands that. He was 26 years old and, you know, his life was cut short, and it took some time and it took a process, a lot of help from the loss program. I ended up going on antidepressants, which I fought for a long time, but it helped me to even out a little bit, like what Sharon was saying. I didn't want to go on antidepressants because I thought antidepressants would make me very emotionless, and I still wanted to cry. I didn't want to feel numb. I just needed something to kind of help me figure out what I needed to do for the rest of my children and my family, because I still needed to be there for them. I used to run out of my house and go running with Luke's addiction. And so what I decided to do was to turn that running into setting goals for myself. My older son and I did a first 5K together, and we did it for addiction. And then it just became something, you know, for me to do, where if I went running, I felt better. I can't sit here and tell you that I didn't stop in the middle of a run and break down on the sidewalk in my neighborhood and totally lose it. But I let it out. I just cried and then picked myself up and kept going. I know not everybody can run. I do like to go on walks. And when I walk through, you know, Buffalo Creek by my house, it's open, and I look up at the sky, look at the clouds. I talk to Luke. I talk to Luke all the time, but I think being outside and doing something for myself has been a process for me to work through my days. And there are days that I still don't want to get up out of bed, but I really force myself to do something. The journaling that I do, I cry my eyes out when I journal. So I think that's what, like Sharon and I talked about, for me, the journaling helps me cry, because I still need to let it out. But if you can, you know, consider medication if you need it, and take a walk, you know, go for a run, go for a bike ride, whatever you can do to help yourself kind of get through the process. You know, our grief will never go away. And, you know, some days are worse than others, but I think that the exercise really, truly helps me to push forward and be there for the rest of my family.
Thank you. That was great. You know what, I think the one thing I liked all that you said, but that you broke down and cried and cried and cried. And then you got that out of your system. And I think that's the goal, is to get that out. And then the next time you cry, it's a different cry. It's not the same one, so to speak. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right. We have Ann Hennessy. Or I should say your last name, Ann.
Hi.
I don't, wait, Ann's not, okay, there she is.
There I am.
Sorry, it took me a
Oh, there
minute.
you
Sorry
are.
about that, Ann.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, Sharon asked me to be here because I am in her grief writing group, and we started this about 1.5 years ago. We lost our son Alex almost 8 years ago to suicide, and you know, I've taken advantage of many different, you know, loss programs. They've all been really, really helpful. And I think probably in every iteration, it was suggested that journaling would be helpful. And I simply couldn't do it. I don't know if I was afraid. I would think that's probably it, like writing down like putting down my feelings and trying to deal with you know, the loss of our son. So when Sharon came up with this idea for a grief writing group, that I thought I have to join. So we meet twice a month, and we usually, you know, usually everyone has written something, but what's really, really helpful is Sharon has started with sending us prompts and talking about prompts, like just to get us going. And then as we wrote every week, she suggested different forms of writing. So, you know, just a straight narrative, or poetry, and we got into haikus, limericks. The most difficult for me is that writing to your lost, you know, your loved one. But the structure of the group, where we meet twice a month, we meet with other people who are writing as well, I find invaluable. And in the beginning, I was probably writing more a chronicle of events. But as time went on, I felt safe and brave enough to really write about my actual feelings, that I guess what I was really tamping down. And, you know, I have other children, adult children, and, you know, we would talk about our son, but we never really shared how we were feeling about losing him. And he had a serious mental illness. So leading up to his suicide, it was tough. It was tough on him, and it was tough on the rest of us. So we always kind of tiptoed around it, kind of thing. What I found over the course of this writing in this group, you know, just getting to the point where I could write things down, or write feelings down, or just write and not know what would come out. And then we share them, and to get feedback from the other people in the group and have them point out something that I didn't even realize I had expressed. It's invaluable, and even in the sense that now I've been able to share my writings with my family, you know, and we're discussing things more openly than we ever did before about what it meant to have our son in our family, and what to have, you know, what it means now that he's gone. It took me 8 years to get here, but this has been a real eye opener, and it becomes less and less terrifying to write about the grief and the loss. And it makes it feel like it's possible for me to live with this, and clears the air so I can have all of those good memories of my son, which is what I was really hoping to start to be able to think about. What he was, what he is, not his illness. So that's my story.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Any?
Thank you, Anne. That was lovely. This is an unsolicited comment, but I was at your writing group in the very beginning, not in it, but this is before Sharon felt comfortable starting the Zoom, you know, opening it up. So I had an opportunity to hear the kind of sharing and writing that your group was doing. And it was always my intention to just open the group and then walk away from the computer and go clean a bathroom or something. That was my intention. But once I opened it, I could not leave the room. I was riveted by the quality of sharing that your group did. And I mean, I was just riveted. So I just had to throw that in there. But I also wanted to say there's some other comments in the chat about things people have done to help themselves.
Can we do that at the end?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to know.
I just want to make sure we don't forget about the comments that are in the chat. Yeah, but yeah, your writing group, I think, has been an amazing thing for the program. Yeah, and for the participants.
So we want to get to the next slide. Thanks, Anne. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. It's I'm going to start talking about nurturing, self-nurturing. The first step in the recovery process is to admit that you want to change your thinking, how we think about our loss, how we think about ourselves related to that loss, what we tell ourselves about that loss, and whether we believe things can get better. It is very natural to want to gravitate toward good mental health. I think that's a natural phenomenon, that we want to feel good, we want to be healthy and end our psychic pain, and we want to be balanced. I believe that good self-image cannot live in your mind with poor self-image. I think it's a conflict. I think you can feel bad about yourself and in another time feel good, but not at the same time. So the goal is to get to have good self-image all the time, so that the others doesn't sneak in. And so that we are going to try to increase our self-image by changing some of our behaviors. I want you to think about this. Thoughts create feelings, feelings create behavior, and behavior reinforce thoughts. And it's like a big circle. You can start it anywhere. Feelings change behavior, behavior changes thoughts, or feelings, wherever you start, it's a circle, and they impact on each other. So nurturing yourself will go a long way to creating positive thinking, thus increasing positive feelings and behavior. So I want to start talking about self-nurturing. And so the first things during the grief process, are you gentle and forgiving with yourself when you make a mistake? Are you able to take breaks from tasks of grief? I mean, to just kind of put it on the shelf for a while, not through alcohol, but through just being able to do something else and get away from it. Are you able to start to do things you enjoy? Do you allow people to help and support you? And are you more comfortable putting yourself down and building yourself up? Those are things that you can think about. And if you go back on YouTube and get this, maybe you can write some of this down. So nurturing yourself will go a long way to creating positive thinking, thus increasing positive feelings and behavior. What I have found, however, is that, and because I've been in the loss program, it's, I deal with mostly lost clients, that the thought of self-nurturing conjures up some feelings. Will you want to do the next slide? So the purpose is to begin to build toward a more positive self-image that will hopefully ease some of your guilt and help you move through grief. So when I say, I want you to be self-nurturing and do things that nurture yourself, thinking about taking good care of my needs and self-nurturing usually stirs up feelings of what? You would be very surprised if you really think about that. When somebody says, oh, you got to start taking care of yourself. Maybe we can take a few ideas people throw out there. What kinds of things come up when you think of letting some of the grief behind you and start taking care of yourself. I'd be interested to know if you have some thoughts on that.
My name is Sandy, and I would say that that brings up intense feelings we're used to of guilt and of shame that my son was dead. And I mean, he died by suicide. And I have to say that as a school nurse and somebody with a lot of resources, I beat myself up pretty badly over how I let this one get past the goalie, so to speak. And so then there was a lot of intense feelings around that. And when you start taking care of yourself, or you start thinking about things you can do to feel better, it's like part of me didn't want to feel better because I shouldn't feel better because my son died.
Excellent. That's perfect. I was hoping somebody would say that, because that exactly I'm sure there's other things too, but that was great. Thank you. Anybody else have a thought on when wanting to take care of yourself, or thinking that you should be? What comes up?
I have something.
Go ahead, Mary Lou.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mary Lou Flores, and I lost my husband to suicide almost a year ago. His anniversary is actually coming up on the 20th. And I've been thinking about taking off my wedding ring. And I haven't been able to do it because it makes me feel guilty. It makes me feel like I'm gonna forget him. And I haven't been able to take it off.
And it stops you from trying to feel good about yourself, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it may actually, when I think about taking it off, it actually makes me feel bad.
Oh, sure.
And
Yes.
because I feel like I'm what's the word? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I lost my word. What am I trying to say is that I'm trying to think it in Spanish also, and it doesn't come to my head. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think you said something very important.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just like I feel like I'm going to betray him. That's what that's the word that I wanted. I feel like I'm betraying him by taking my ring off, and I just don't take it off.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move on?
I don't know if you can hear me, but what if, Mary Lou, if you wore it as a like a necklace or something as an interim thought?
Well,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Like, what if you wore it as a necklace or something in between, wearing it on your finger, for a while, and then, it's kind of like still a memory, but you could gradually not wear it on your hand.
No, that's a good idea. I never really thought about that.
that's a thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts more about how they feel when they think about self-care?
Yeah, I have a thought. Am I?
Okay.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm saying. I had a little bit of a different view shift going through my suicide grief journey. My husband had died of suicide. And I made it a goal a few months ago to make myself to be the strongest person I've ever been. I feel if I was stronger, maybe my husband wouldn't have died by suicide. And also to overcome this incredible, complicated, and complex grief, I need a lot of strength. And I need a lot more strength to take care of my children and I moving forward. And so I just, a few months ago, decided to make that my goal, that I'm going to become the strongest person that I've ever been in my life. And by doing that, I was able to then improve my taking care of myself, nurturing myself, doing things to improve myself, despite my husband's suicide death. because I just really needed to be much stronger. It's a real big impact. The collateral damage that is done by a suicide death is just enormous. And so
Well,
that
so you,
that made that, by doing that shift, I'm able to take care of myself more, and I'm able to get through this suicide grief journey better, I believe.
well, that's great, because you're the goal. That's the goal that I would love for other people. So thank you.
Yes.
So okay, I think we now, we've got some good ideas, and so we can get to the next. And I want to say that on the ones that mentioned not being able to do it because of their loved ones' death, and we tell ourselves things like, if I feel good about myself, or if I start to heal, that means I didn't love them, and really that is so unrealistic and not true. They will always be in your heart. You're going to be around the world. You're going to be in this life for many, many more years. You might as well feel good. So those are irrational thoughts that if I get better, that means I didn't love them. Well, really that's not true. So we want to focus on the irrationality of some of that. So now this is the part that I thought is kind of fun, is that good self-care equals good self-nurturing. And so I've listed some ways to do that. And of course, the whole first page is all about massage. I have a clue that if you go, I don't know where everybody is from, so I couldn't look up massage schools. I don't know where everybody is. But if you go to www.mymassageschool.com, often they have therapists who need to practice their massage skills, and the charge is a lot less than a massage place. I've been there. I don't know how much cheaper it is anymore, but you can go to massage schools and get a massage. So I'm going to go through the massages. They're Swedish massage. It's the most common type you can get. It energizes your body, improves overall health, and they use lotion to protect your skin. Deep tissue massage of course, it uses deeper strokes and harder pressure. They use firm pressure and slow strokes to massage deep layers of muscle and fascia, which is connective tissue that surrounds your muscles. Western massage, I can't say that twice. Western massage promotes relaxation, circulation, and motion, and relieves tension. Sports massages, it's obvious. It's usually when you have an injury, and it focuses where that injury is, and it works on those muscles and building up those muscles. Now, I don't know much about Reiki, but Reiki is a Japanese form of energy healing, which is a subset of alternative medicine. Reiki practitioners use a technique called palm healing, or hands-on healing, through which a universal energy is said to be transferred through the palms of the practitioner to the patient in order to encourage emotional or psychic healing. I only know of one place, and it's in River Forest. I have never been there. I've always wanted to try it, but I've never done it. I think another form of self-care is acupuncture. I think there's some pros and cons about if acupuncture is really helpful. I used to get it, and I went to an acupuncture school that was really not real expensive to do, and had the practitioners who needed to get their degrees practice, and they were very good. They don't let them do anything to you that's not good, but it's just that they're still students, so you get the internship. So those are some forms. Okay, next. The last one, which is delicious. If you've never had a foot massage, they're wonderful. It is a massage that totally focuses on the foot and every part of the foot that relates to another part of your body. It's foot massage reflexology near me will get you some places. These are the ones that I know about, ones in Lake Villa, Schaumburg, and Des Plaines. And they're actually still they're still open.
I'm sorry, I have a comment about what you're saying. If may I, if
Who
I
is
may,
it?
Mary Lou.
Okay.
I have stage 4 cancer.
Uh-huh.
And part of the protocol from my hospital, they give me massages, reflexology, and Reiki.
Okay.
And I like it very, very much. And I believe that that has been helping me not only with the cancer, but also with my grieving process.
Yes.
So I do recommend it very highly.
Yes, thank you. In Japan, they have parks with walkways that are full of rocks, and they're not hard rocks, they're smooth rocks, you know, that are it's not pebbles, but it's kind of a way you can walk barefoot, and they massage the feet, so people go there for lunch. And this is very fun to do, and it's not real expensive. It's not like a full body massage. So if you want to look them up, I think you will like that. And again, when you start to feel like you're taking care of yourself, your thoughts will become more positive. They reflect on how you feel, and then how your body is, and then your body feels good, then your spirit feels good. I mean, so it's really very much connected, but you have to start somewhere. So even if you can't get out of bed, if somebody has to drag you to get a foot massage, let them do that, you know, and then pretty soon I think you will enjoy some of that. Okay, next. And finally,
Can I comment about the massage, Sharon?
But
can I comment about the massage really fast? If anyone's
Sure.
familiar with The Body Keeps the Score, so for those survivors that have been actually traumatized by their loss, massage and finding ways to sort of relax the body and your muscles is actually a trauma treatment to help sort of deal with the psychological impact of the trauma too.
Mhm.
And also one more thing too, if you're in the city, there's Chinese massage places that are amazing. You put your feet in hot water and they massage your body like with fully clothed, and they're like $35 too. So that's another fun one.
Yeah, and again, you know, when you're doing this and you start to get good thoughts about yourself, it just kind of goes over to the spirit, mind, body connection, and they work together. So, and this is the final. For those of you who are, if you have an addiction problem, then there's AA. If you grew up in a family of alcoholics, which I did, I went to adult children, ACOA is Adult Children of Alcoholics, and they're support groups, and you talk about living what you learn, you know, and with living with an alcoholic. And then of course, if you live currently with an alcoholic, an active alcoholic, is Al-Anon, and they have Narcanon, which is Narcotics Anonymous, if someone is doing drugs, and Alateen if somebody has a teenage daughter living in a family of you know, those are all helpful groups. And then finally, in working with the treatment centers, I used to think that that AA had so many goofy sayings. I shouldn't say goofy, but you know, it's let go, let God, fake it until you make it, stinking thinking. I thought, wow, but you know what? Those are all things that they kept saying to themselves, you know, fake it till you make it. And I think that gets people through. And then the 12 steps in AA and Al-Anon and ACOA are really a 12 steps paradigm for living if you take the word alcohol out. And the first step is we admitted we were powerless over, and then you put that in there, and our lives had become unmanageable, because powerlessness is not a negative. It kind of tells us that we can't do it all, we can't solve it all, that the only thing I have control over is how I think about things and what I do about them, not about anybody else. So the 12 steps are really very good, but you just have to take out the alcohol, you know, out, and you put in whatever you want, what you're powerless over. But the other 11 steps are very much an idea on how to live your life. Okay, final. My favorite thing, and I hope that I know you've all have all seen this, is the serenity prayer. And if you want to say it to yourself with me or say it out loud, it is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that is probably the most beautiful prayer I know, because it kind of says it all. The wisdom to know the difference. Because what you have to accept what you can't change, and you got to know which ones that is. And I mean, that says it all for me. And I love that prayer, and I hope you do too. And it doesn't have to do with alcohol necessarily, it's life. So I hope this was helpful. I am finished with my slideshow.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sharon. I just want to go ahead and open the chat. One of the things you just hit on, and that was in the chat, someone had asked about a 12-step recovery program. So you just hit on that there at the end.
Who's Dawn? Where's Dawn? She said, it's nice to see my cute face. What?
Oh, that was probably a private message to you. Lots of just thank yous, you know, for our two folks, Denise and Anne, who shared. Someone else said taking care of a pet is very helpful. It helps them emotionally. We've certainly heard that from some other folks in our program. I've heard a lot about pets. This comment says, I created a prayer garden with native plants on the side of the garage. I bought multiple yards of compost and mulch. The physical labor was good for my soul, and it made me so tired I could finally sleep. And I did not know this, Eileen, who I definitely know, but I did not know this about her, she is a Reiki practitioner for 30 years. So you'll have to chat about that with her, Sharon, if you haven't already.
Well, you know, I know we talked about Reiki in River Forest, but I didn't remember that you were the practitioner.
Yes.
Oh, well, here I've been looking for one, and there you are.
Yeah, we'll have to do a circle next time. Yeah. No, I learned when at Northwestern in the palliative care and hospice program, I had a volunteer who asked if she could do Reiki on patients. And I said, I don't know, because I don't know what it is. And she said, well, why don't we have a session? And I was just bought in hook, line, and sinker. It's very powerful. It's great work. And it could really be helpful in grief. So yeah. See, we keep secrets from each other, Sharon. You have to know
Yeah.
Even in the groups. In the groups. I just wanted to make a comment too, because I think for a lot of folks, you know, if it wasn't the person that we lost, maybe it's somebody in our family. And just make this comment in case anyone else relates, but my qualifier, as they're called sometimes, a Naranon or an Al-Anon, I really thought that my qualifier, that losing my brother was going to be the thing that would make them stop using and would somehow fix their addiction. And I think in just kind of hearing, you know, the presentations this evening and kind of thinking through that, and how much more likely it is for them to get more severe and more difficult after trauma and after experiencing something really painful, is just an important reminder for me. Because that was a place of real, of like extra hurt and disappointment when I thought that like, oh, this is going to be the thing. And we're not going to have to deal with that anymore either. And that's not how things have worked out. So an important reminder.
And I'll leave you with this, that if you think you have a problem with alcohol or drugs, talk to somebody. Again, don't do it by yourself. You know, that there's a lot of good places around, there's a lot of treatment, there's a lot of outpatient that you can go to get help, but don't do it by yourself. That's very dangerous.
And I think that even if you're not ready to talk about it or not ready to even sort of think about it, you can always go online and read about it. I think that's a nice first step. Sort of just reading about people's stories can be really helpful. And if COVID has done anything, it's sort of opened up a grand world to support groups online. Smart Recovery is another non-12 step. It's more of a harm reduction than an abstinence model that a lot of people like. A lot of people have started different support groups, and there's definitely online discussions. So I think that it sort of opens up a world to anonymity for people who want it. And definitely, you know, we have resources too. So don't hesitate to reach out to anyone in the loss program.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to Sharon and to Jessica for presenting on this very important topic. I know that this is probably, brought up some things to think about for a lot of folks. And I also want to extend a big thank you to Denise and Anne for being willing to share your story and your vulnerability with us. It's always so healing and just a really beautiful thing to see. So thank you so much for your participation. So we will be back with another First Monday Grief Speaker presentation next month. Cindy, who's over here, I see her over there. Hi, Cindy. She's going to be presenting on grief reactions of children and adolescents. So you'll get more information about that coming to your inbox soon. We'll have the recording available as soon as I can get it up on our YouTube. So if there's anybody else that you think would benefit, who's in the LOST program or not in the LOST program, who just might benefit from the information, you can always feel free to share the links. So thanks for spending some time with us. All right. Bye, everyone. If you've got questions or anything left over, feel free to stick them in the chat. We can stick around for a couple minutes. So good to see so many of you. Thanks so much.